And the guy that's singing starts crying because it's so. Are we starting? Are we starting? Oh,
that was a great way to start it.
All right. Well,
it just starts recording, and the very first thing it grabs is, and the guy who's singing it, he's crying. And the guy who's listening to it is also crying.
He's also crying. Everyone's crying.
All crying.
Well, welcome to our second edition of the podcast for the Scribe. As always, I'm Brian Willite, and this is...
I'm Kevin Matos. For this edition of the podcast, we are going to be focusing on a more, narrow set of themes as opposed to the last one where we jump through a bunch of different topics. This time we'll be focusing essentially on the freedom of speech, political
I said the Second Amendment, didn't I?
Censorship, and maybe even the list of banned books. Hopefully you'll enjoy this podcast, and as always, look forward to future podcasts. So, first topic that we have, we have is
political correctness. Yeah.
What about freedom of speech? You want to start with that?
Oh yeah, sure. Let's start generally with freedom of speech. A lot of people kind of has this wrong.
Yeah. Okay, so our producer set us up with a small fact sheet of things to kind of keep in mind while we're discussing these topics. So one thing he provided us is a copy of, the freedom of speech, the First Amendment. And it says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or of the right to people peaceably to assemble, and to petition the government for redress of grievances. The First Amendment protections of speakers' rights to speech and assembly vary based on the speaker's chosen forum. The Supreme Court breaks down forums into three types: traditional public forums, designated forums, and non-public forums.
Yeah. Finally,
some public property is not a forum at all.
That's a handful. It's at first glance, it's a handful to take, especially hearing it. But it's actually pretty simple, And
let's not forget the fact that this covers a whole range of, different media and publications. So it's surprising that, something that small can actually cover so many different legal topics.
Yeah. So, freedom of speech, I think, was originally supposed to only be towards the federal government. But the 14th Amendment is pretty much set it so that the states are responsible as well. But freedom of speech has been a hot topic over the past few months and years.
Freedom of speech is always a pretty important topic because in an era in which technology is, advancing and growing at a much more exponential rates, and, more and more people get access to it, more and more people find that they have a platform to voice, their opinions and beliefs. Before the times of the internet, it was a bit more controlled. You were people who wanted to publish something had to go through like rigorous standards.
Yeah.
And through a whole bunch of different people in order to get that published. People who wanted to just go outright and protest something right then and there would have to assemble somewhere and would be kind of limited to that small general area. They do not have the reach that people have now with the internet.
Yeah, now you can just kind of make a blog and, go to town with it, which of course creates a lot of problems with cyberbullying or, just being nasty YouTube comments. It's some people would say that freedom of speech, too much freedom of speech would be a bad thing. Me, however, I kind of like the internet as a forum. It really sets the tone of true freedom of speech. Not a lot of people is going to like it. People are going to get offended. People are going to get angry over it, and I think that's the way the internet should be. That's a personal opinion of mine. Other than that, that said, freedom of speech isn't always protected. like speech that are used to defame someone, or speech that is used to personally or mentally hurt someone, is not protected under the rights to free speech.
Yeah, and we have to even remember that, although it may not seem like it because it is generally an unregulated place, the internet is also not completely protected by freedom of speech. Mainly because, we go online and we go to different websites, and one of the issues that we have nowadays is that, because they are largely unregulated, we believe that, no one has control over it. However, people, companies and, government entities have control over the content on their own site.
Yeah.
So, right, in those kinds of places on the internet, they have, every legal right to do as they wish, provided, it falls within their country's laws. So while you might be able to say that in an American website, they can, censor people and that they should allow people to have freedom of speech, companies that are based off in other countries, probably in Europe or in, Sweden or places like that do not really have that kind of, freedom, or not that kind of range of that freedom.
Yeah.
They have every legal right to try and censor, stuff on their own website.
That said, but would they take the time? Yeah, it turns out, I see a lot of violations of statutes and laws from many places and all the websites I visit, and most of the time it's gone unnoticed, because to scour the internet for lawbreakers and people who who defame someone, it's a lot like counting raisins in a muffin. It takes a very, very, very long time.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the police would rather just focus on the big crimes rather than just the small crimes.
Oh, definitely. And it's mainly just like, it's not like saying that it's a consistent thing that happens. Obviously, so much traffic, so many people to keep track of.
Yeah.
A lot of things can, be out of your control, and it might be too much for a company to handle or something. Like they might not really focus that much that many resources over to making sure all that's under control. However, it is a thing that could happen and does happen at times, and it's mainly just to be aware that though we believe that we are Americans and we're on the internet is unregulated, does not mean that everywhere you go on the internet is not gonna be you're gonna fall under the same protection of freedom of speech, because not all of them are based in America, so not all of them share the same kind of freedoms that Americans have.
Yeah. No. All right, that makes sense. Well, I mean, there are many websites anyway that sort of like you do your own sort of censorship.
Yeah.
There are profanity rules or privacy settings on Facebook. You can block people. You can blacklist them. So people could still have that freedom of speech, but you get to choose whether you want to hear that speech.
Yeah.
So that way you're not interfering with their freedom, but you're not allowing others to interfere with the other people's freedom to be happy.
Yeah.
That said, there are also other types of people complain about political correctness a lot.
Yeah.
We're going to go into that. People complain about political correctness a lot. They believe that being PC is sort of abridging your rights to free speech, especially with politicians, radio jockeys, TV spokesmen. Just everyone around the world feel that being PC is tantamount to being fake and censoring your own self.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of feel like being politically correct is not that it's not as good as a lot of people would lead you to believe. I kind of feel like it's being a little bit phony, I mean, sure, you want to be nice to everyone you want to meet, but being nice, so like being overly nice to the point where you literally censor how you feel about certain topics. If it's an actual discussion, I feel that's sort of backwards,
Oh yes, our producer just informed us how the UK, was one example of a European country, has has added an extension to the Malicious Communications Act, which essentially means that internet trolls could face up to 2 years in prison
Ooh.
for combating, and it's their manner of combating cruelty.
Huh. Oh, internet trolls can face to 2 years in prison, and it's all right. That's kind of ridiculous,
Yeah.
honestly, in my opinion. Like, how are you going to put someone in prison for 2 years for trolling?
Yeah.
You know?
So essentially, we already have one country there as an example that regulates what they can of the internet, and of course they're not going to be able to catch a whole lot of people.
Of course not.
They're not going to be able to catch everyone. They're not going to be able to keep a constant eye on it. But the fact that they have this, and the fact that they probably have a task force for it, means that they probably are going to get some people imprisoned under this law.
Which is, I still find it very ridiculous. How are you going to lock people up for trolling? There's no malicious intent towards it. I mean, unless maybe if I'd kind of agree not to 2 years. I'd kind of agree if someone would, take someone's picture and post it on the internet and it's really embarrassing, like the guy's naked or something. Like, maybe I don't understand that. But for 2 years for just trolling someone. Trolling is a general term,
Yeah.
It's really general. Trolling doesn't just mean, this guy cyber stalked this person, took pictures and posted on the internet. Trolling could also mean that someone's just flaming someone. Someone's just calling this dude, pardon my French, an asshole or something. But trolling it's too general to just lock someone up for trolling.
I'm pretty sure that as it is with many laws, they probably have very specific definitions for it.
All right.
So essentially what we were saying was that, they probably have more specific definitions, or at the very least, they have a specific enough legal definition for what a troll is for this law. Because, when it comes to laws, the wording does not have to be, as specific as possible. Or they would like it to be as specific as possible. Well, a lot of people don't do that. And they'll probably just, go for more general terms that allow them to kind of stretch the limits of what they can do.
I guess, but this kind of falls into how do you even enforce that?
Yeah.
If someone calls up the, I'm not sure what the legal, just the cops, If someone calls the British cops and say, hey, I just been trolled on the internet, can you do something about this? How do they get to investigating that? Do they go on the computer? Do they go on the forum where the guy is supposedly trolled and say, oh, wow, yeah, you got trolled here? Or, do they take pictures? How would you enforce that? How would you find the guy that supposedly trolled this other guy? And it just seems like one of those laws where you probably should think before you create the law. Don't just go off of public opinion alone. You've got to put in the factors of, is this enforceable? Will people enforce this? And are the penalties reasonable enough to enforce this sort of law? That's usually the guidelines to making a law. It has to be reasonable.
It does. However, as we already know, a lot of laws do manage to, get past people even when they can be unreasonable. And I think one of the reasons why that happened here is probably because, as we mentioned before, the internet is largely unregulated. It's rather new, and like relatively speaking, it was from the 1980s or something.
Yeah, the internet officially began like the early 1980s, the early 80s.
Yeah, so
late 70s.
It's been about 30 years or so, and for something that's growing this fast, that people have not paid enough attention to, and trying to kind of like regulate it and maintain it from the beginning. At this point, it will be very difficult for them to try and do that.
But is that what we want, though? A regulated internet? The internet is... I'm sorry. The internet's sort of is getting big enough to be... that it could be recognized as sort of a third country, like its own sort of... I mean, it's a weird term to use, but it's sort of like a cyber country, like a cyber community, you know.
No, it's understandable, and it really is growing a lot. But this is one of the reasons why people like. This is just a few of the examples in which countries are trying to kind of like regulate it. It's not necessarily a thing whether it's not necessarily that it should be regulated. Is that countries want to have some kind of control over what happens, and whether or not the government is good or acting in the best interest of the people. They're still trying to maintain some control and order, and the internet is currently something that can be hazardous to that, at least for some government entities, not necessarily all of them. And now we're seeing a lot of different problems arising with the internet. Government agencies want to regulate it, but then we also have private companies that want to make more of a profit off of it by doing things such as getting rid of net neutrality, which is actually very dangerous, because what it basically means is that before net neutrality, like with net neutrality, what we get is essentially the same platform, the same beginning, start. Basically, we get the same start. So whether or not you are a person with your own small business, a person who's just trying to start out a blog, or as a freelancer, journalist, trying to do your own thing, it means that you get access to the same people at the same speed and the same content as a private multi-million-dollar company. Now, if you were to get rid of that, what it basically means is that private companies could pay more money to get things to you faster. So people who cannot afford to compete with them would fall behind, and so their content would be coming at you, days later, for example.
So probably set up a monopoly or something.
Exactly. So now you have, some companies trying to privatize, trying to profit and privatize this by also regulating it in their own way so that they get more profit.
But I guess that wouldn't be so bad if there were competition in the first place. All the cable companies, all the companies that provide internet aren't competing. They are all, it's sort of like gang territory. They're all in their own territory, and they tell other companies, hey, listen, don't go to this territory.
Yeah.
And instead of that company saying, no, we want this territory, they go, okay, and they move on to another territory. So in essence, this is already a monopoly. Sure. Because there's no competition. And with net neutrality gone, there'll be even less competition. So no matter which cable company you go with, you're still getting shafted on the deal.
Yeah, and especially when you consider that even without taking away net neutrality and privatizing the internet, even without that, you still have as we mentioned in our last podcast, we have Verizon trying to start its own news network, like news website and everything.
Yeah.
And they already, as we already know, they're trying. They don't want any of their staff writers to talk about the stuff that they're doing, especially that age, the NSA and communications and things like that.
Yeah.
So if you were to take that away, you were to take net neutrality away, then you would have companies like Verizon who create their own, news websites and purposely censor things that make them look bad. And so it would be very difficult for you to actually get to the bottom of it and know, what is true and what is not, and like what are they hiding, what they aren't.
Yeah.
So basically, the reason for net neutrality is mainly to keep everyone informed and on an equal base.
Yeah. Also, I kind of think it's there to avoid government censorship. It's been over history. As soon as the government wants to take power, censorship is what they go towards. They take away all the intellectuals. They take away information to the outside world. They take away pretty much anything that would give someone a certain mindset. And I think getting rid of net neutrality is just. I know a slippery slope it's a fallacy. Slippery slope is a fallacy, but I believe that this would be a slippery slope to censorship of the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And once the internet gets censored, oh man, my words aren't good today. Once the internet gets censored, sites like Wikipedia, sites like Google is going to become a lot more empty. You don't want those sites to be empty. This is the information age. This is the age where the internet holds the most information in the world. And once that information starts getting censored, then you're back to how it was before the internet.
Yeah.
No, but yeah.
So, we've made some good points about that. Now, one of the other, narrower topics that we want to go into in regards to censorship and, political correctness would be, what we can say, whether we're allowed to say it, where we're allowed to say it, that kind of thing, On our fact sheet here, it says that, obviously, libel is not allowed. Libel is a method of defamation expressed by print, writing, pictures, signs, effigies, or any communication embodied in physical form that is injurious to a person's reputation, exposes a person to public hatred, contempt, or ridicule, or injures a person in his or her business or profession. So libel is essentially, saying that this person or this group is bad.
Is it libel?
What?
Is it libel or libel?
Libel.
It's Libel. It's weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Just think about pronunciation for colonel.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah.
It's nothing alike. So essentially, it says, a form of defamation. Now, we have a few different categories here. So we have libel, we have slander, fighting words, and the advocacy of illegal action.
Fighting words, them's fighting words.
Yes. So we have slander, which is a false statement usually made orally, which defames another person. Unlike libel, damages from slander are not presumed and must be proven by the party suing. Then we have fighting words, which is words which will likely make the person whom they address commit an act of violence. Fighting words are a category of speech that is unprotected by the First Amendment. And then you have advocacy of illegal action, a category of speech unprotected by the First Amendment. For many years, the constitutional rule famously was that speech was unprotected if words used are used in such circumstances and are of such a nature as to create a clear and present danger that they will bring about the substantive evils that Congress has the right to prevent.
Jeez.
So, and then under protected language, we have absolute privilege, which is if a statement is made in a certain context or in certain venues, the First Amendment may give the speaker, an absolute defense to a charge of defamation. This privilege usually only exists in the government context. For example, sworn testimony in a judicial or legislative hearing is privileged.
This is a fact-heavy podcast episode we're doing.
Oh, definitely.
Wow. Man.
We can't really, talk about censorship without also knowing what we're talking about.
True.
And knowing what is protected and what isn't. Now, so one case that you have here is slander. It says a false statement usually made orally, which defames another person. Unlike libel, it's not presumed. So, I guess you could say that, slander is basically just...
It's like gossip. It's what's the word I'm looking for? It's unconfirmed gossip, basically.
Essentially.
It's what happens every day on the internet. Everyone is slanderous content all over the place.
Then fighting words is that make the person they address commit an act of violence.
Yeah.
I guess I can kind of understand that, and that you are now is that it is unprotected by the First Amendment, but does that mean that it makes you not liable by under the law if you get someone to commit an act of violence?
But fighting words, I don't think fighting words is I don't think they use that in court a lot, Mm-hmm. When someone, I don't think they do, because fighting words can be anything, because what if you're dealing with a sensitive person? You get someone that says, he talked ish about my bear, it's like But he's an inanimate object. It was fighting words. He made me want to fight him on purpose. I don't, that's weird. I don't think I've ever heard of that one.
And then advocacy of illegal action, that one's actually much more well known, which is mainly just like if you incite people to commit, violence or riot or, a crime, essentially.
Yeah.
That is immediate, then in that case, you would be, in trouble with the law for having, compelled them to do that.
Mm. Yeah, that one's a natural. You can't just go on the stream and say, "Hey, buy drugs." That you can't.
Yeah, you usually have to go into an alleyway and do that.
Yeah, you gotta go to a kid's playground. Oh, what's this? Huh?
So yeah, producer just passed us, a bit of a note on fighting words.
Fighting words might be used in situations with co-defendants. Culpability of action in the criminal act. All right.
So essentially, what our producer says is that it might be used in situations with co-defendants. So what it would be doing is trying to see who would be the one to blame in the criminal act.
Yeah, with two defendants.
So, essentially if you...
I just never heard of it, that's...
So I guess what they're saying is kind of like, if I were to, say things to anger you,
ooh,
and continue doing so until you attack me.
Yeah, and then
you'd commit assault. But then the question here would be, am I
liable?
Am I the one to blame for purposely doing that?
Yeah.
Or is it just you to blame for getting angry enough to commit the crime?
Yeah. All right. No, I can see how that's used. I've just never heard of it until now. I can see how that's used.
I guess it's a bit more difficult, and I guess it's not a thing you would probably see in a criminal case.
Unless there's co-defendants or something.
Probably more like in a civil case.
Ooh, civil.
I imagine it being used more in civil
cases. All assaults are basically civil cases. Assault and battery. Most assault and battery cases are civil. Most of them. That's only until you get into first degree. That's when it gets federal. Yeah. But all right. So let's go into
trigger warnings.
Yeah, trigger warnings.
Now there is a thing that's been going on. I would say recently, but it's something that's been happening over the past few years or so, but it's been growing in momentum. Essentially, it is the use of trigger warnings, which is that people want to add warnings to different types of media to warn people about its content. Now, this isn't exactly something new when you consider that the ratings we see on TV shows are essentially trigger warnings. Since you have some that say rated R for sexual content or violence. You'll have some that are saying rated PG-13, parents strongly cautioned. It'll have profanity, things like that. So we essentially already have that on TV. It is something that exists. It's just that in the same way that in TV it's kind of small and just there for those who are looking for it, and not necessarily for everyone.
Mm.
We don't really have that in books, and some people are wondering, can we do this to books? As one example.
Mm.
Now, obviously, and once again, we're going into the fallacy of slippery slope. This could, be a problem in that it could try to cover too many bases in order to not offend or harm someone. That being said, there's obviously different ways in which people want to apply it. Some people say, for example, there were some ideas of implementing that on a college campus, saying for all of the books to have trigger warnings. And one person suggested that I really liked was to simply have a syllabus with a trigger warning available that you can then hand out to students who ask for it.
All right. Yeah.
So you simply the same syllabus, only for each book you kind of say, this or that, this or that, this or that, and you don't necessarily give it out. You just say, if anyone wants to know, come up to me and ask, and I'll give you, the syllabus with the intended information that you're looking for.
All right.
That one's a bit more understandable. Now, and personally, if that one were to get implemented, I would not have a problem with it. Now, if we're talking about everything that can offend someone, or the majority of things that can offend someone, or be problematic or offensive, then that in itself would cover too many bases. Though I do see the need at times for some books to have a trigger warning, I do not see it as as much of a necessity. For example, for one of my classes, I had to read The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. Now that contains some, somewhat explicit scenes of incest, of rape, and of sexual abuse, domestic abuse, and then also it involves a child.
Oh, okay.
So all of that, can bother people. In books like that, you don't necessarily have to put the trigger warning on the book, but if you're going to have this in a college campus, you might want to alert people and inform them just in cases they have their own traumatic experiences that can be brought back to the surface by reading this book.
Okay, well, here's my opinion. I think that putting a trigger warning in a book reduces the impact that the book has on you. The scenes there are inserted so that they could have an impact. They're supposed to trigger you in an emotional way. They're supposed to make you feel disgusted, angry. They're supposed to make you feel outraged, because that's what the author intended. They want you to feel some type of way about it. And putting a trigger warning before that could effectively destroy that sort of feeling. It destroys your immersion, and it destroys the fun about reading a book. When you read a book, when you play a video game, you want to not only be surprised, but you want to be immersed into it. You want to feel like you're right there. And when you're right there being pissed about what's happening, it enhances your experience. Now, that said, I'm not sure if this is correct, but trigger warnings were used for veterans of wars, I believe, of big wars that really messed a lot of people up. I feel that a trigger warning system that are used to keep veterans from
relapsing?
Flashbacking for something that might offend you is a little bit much. Maybe just a rating. Like you said, there are ratings in movies and other media. Maybe a rating of the book would be fine. AO, adults only, or, could contain gratuitous blah, blah, blah. But putting a trigger warning on the book might be, it's over, I think it's overreaching. However, I kind of liked your syllabus idea, putting a trigger warning in the syllabus, or just warning them, hey, this class is going to cover a lot of subjects that a lot of people feel uncomfortable with, And I believe that just giving a warning is better than just outright banning,
Yeah.
That's always a bad thing. But yeah, I think we should think about how the book makes us feel rather than, what we should do to make sure that the book doesn't make you feel that. We've got to understand why it makes us feel that way. We've got to accept that it makes us feel that way, and we've got to know that we got to take the precautions so it doesn't make us feel that way. In our daily lives, not just before we read it.
Yeah.
So I think that's my stance on trigger warning. It's kind of unnecessary in my opinion.
Yeah, and definitely, we do live in an era now where we have access to a lot of information on the internet. Now, people that are worried about this could, as an option, go online and try to look up a bit of information and kind of like prepare themselves ahead of time, just in case the book has that. Now, the problem that would be is that depending on what books you have to read, or like how many books you have to read, then that means you have to do quite a bit of research just to kind of like find out whether or not it is, because you don't have to do that for every book.
Yeah.
However, if you don't have a lot of them, then it can be useful, and also if you have, and then also just putting them in a syllabus can also be helpful, because it kind of reduces the amount of research that students have to do, and it would not be much for the professor to do, considering that for the most part, a majority of the professors have read the material that they're assigning.
You'd hope they would.
Yeah. That's why I said for the most part, it's like some of them do, some of them don't, but it's really just like
yeah.
It's a thing that the professor can kind of work on ahead of time, because they do have to plan out the reading material for the classes like quite a few months in advance.
Well, all right. I think we've covered a lot of bases this podcast. I think we've been more organized than the last one. Fact sheet was really helpful. Thanks again, producer Alex. Thanks for if you decided to listen to the second podcast. Thanks a lot for listening, watching.
Watching that nice big white S on that purple background.
Wonderful.
For approximately 40 minutes. So.
Yeah, it just looks lovely. It's graceful.
It is.
Graceful S.
I put a lot of time into that, and I'm glad that you guys enjoyed it for that long. If you were high, then hopefully that made the time go by quicker or slower. I don't know. Whatever furthers your enjoyment.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for listening anyway.
Thanks for listening in. We're gonna be trying to have these up online every other week, usually in between the printed publications, to kind of cover that time in which that 1 week in which there's no new content running, and while we're working on more on other content. However, you can expect to see us kind of like get more and more organized as time goes on.
Yeah.
Trying to come up with more material, things that are relevant to everyone who's listening, and also the student body.
Yes. And also stay on topic. That's what we here at the Scribe like to do. We'll
also make sure that random British people don't accidentally walk in here and speak at our broadcast.
Of course.
You might not see that British person again.
Yeah. Well. Anyway, thanks for listening. This is Brian. This is Kevin. Signing off.
All right. Have a good night, guys.